Alright, so if all of you wouldn't mind playing along, could you give me a big peace sign if any of you believe that you're an artist? Now, while you're thinking about that, an artist is someone who can cook, someone who can make music, someone who can write, someone who can even paint, who we all generally believe to be an artist. So, now after saying that, if you've ever written anything you're passionate about, if you've ever cooked anything you've been passionate about, or if you've ever painted something, even when you're in the second grade and you felt really proud about it, please give me a little peace sign. Now also, a little brief history on the peace sign, which has to do with this as well. Now make sure to do your peace sign like this, as opposed to backwards, because in Ireland, this is not good. This is how you want to say peace. So, why I asked you that question is, basically, Robert Frost, who President Kennedy was speaking about, he was an artist. He was the epitome of an artist. And essentially, he was so important to President Kennedy because he spoke at his inauguration. The words that he spoke at his inauguration, it was from a poem. And initially, he was going to speak from a poem that he had constructed. But the weather was so bad that day that he had to recite something that had come from memory. And it was so beautiful and it was so original that President Kennedy was moved and had to speak after his passing. On October 6, 1963, President Kennedy spoke at Amherst College in Massachusetts. And the people he spoke in front of were the family and friends and kind of the close relatives to Robert Frost. Now, the reason this was so significant at Amherst College is because this was after the death of Robert Frost. And then a man named Mr. McCloy, who was at the time this disarmament advisor for President Kennedy, actually had thought, he was invited to go to the actual commemoration of Robert Frost, and it was an opening of a library at Amherst College. And he thought, who would be better to speak at this kind of memory of Robert Frost than President Kennedy because of their close relationship. President Kennedy overall just kind of talked about how much Robert Frost influenced us, and he talked about what's most important is the influence of art in our society and how art really affects us all. But really, JFK took a step back from instead of talking about all the problems of society, he talked about the beauty in America, and he talked about what he hopes America to accomplish. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm very honored to be here with you on this occasion, which means so much to this college, and also means so much to art and the progress of the United States. This college is a part of the United States. It belongs to it. So did Mr. Frost in a large sense. This day devoted to the memory of Robert Frost offers an opportunity for reflection which is prized by politicians as well as by others, and even by poets. For Robert Frost is one of the grand figures of our time in America. He was supremely two things: an artist and an American. A nation reveals itself not only by the men it produces, by the men it honors, by the men it remembers. In America, our heroes have customarily run into men of large accomplishments. But today, this college and country honors a man whose contribution was not to our size, but to our spirit, not to our political beliefs, but to our insight, not to our self-esteem, but to our self-comprehension. In honoring Robert Frost, we can therefore pay honor to the deepest sources of our national strength. That strength takes many forms, and the most obvious forms are not always the most significant. The men who create power make an indispensable contribution to the nation's greatness. But the men who question power make a contribution just as indispensable, especially when that questioning is disinterested, for they determine whether we use power or power uses us. Our national strength matters, but the spirit which informs and controls our strength matters just as much. This was the special significance of Robert Frost. He brought an unsparing instinct for reality to bear upon the platitudes and pieties of society. His sense of human tragedy forfeited him against self-deception and easy consolation. I have been, he wrote, one acquainted with the night. And because he knew the midnight as well as the high noon, because he understood the ordeal as well as the triumph of the human spirit, he gave his age strength with which to overcome despair. At bottom, he held a deep faith in the spirit of man. And it is hardly an accident that Robert Frost coupled poetry and power, where he saw poetry as the means of saving power from itself. When poetry leads man towards arrogance, poetry reminds him of his limitations. When power narrows the areas of a man's concern, poetry reminds him of the richness and diversity of his existence. When power corrupts, poetry cleanses. For art establishes the basic human truth which must serve as the touchstone of our judgment. The artist, however faithful to his personal vision of reality, becomes the last champion of the individual mind and sensibility against intrusive society in an officious state. The great artist is thus a solitary figure. He has, as Frost said, a lover's quarrel with the world. In pursuing his perceptions of reality, he must often sail against the currents of his time. This is not a popular goal. If Robert Frost was much honored in his lifetime, it was because a good many preferred to ignore his darker truths. Yet in retrospect, we see how the artist's fidelity has strengthened the fiber of our national life. If sometimes our great artists have been the most critical of society, it is because their sensitivity and their concern for justice, which must motivate any true artist, and it makes them aware that our nation falls short of its highest potential. I see little of more importance to the future of our country and our civilization than the full recognition of the place of an artist. If art is to nourish the roots of our culture, society must set the artist free to follow his vision wherever it takes him. We must never forget that art is not a form of propaganda. Art is a form of truth. As Mr. McLeish once remarked of poets, there is nothing worse for our trade than to be in style. In free society, art is not a weapon and does not belong in the spheres of polemic and ideology. Artists are not engineers of the soul. It may be different elsewhere, but democratic society, in it, the highest duty of the writer, the composer, the artist, is to remain true to himself and let the chips fall where they may. In serving his vision of the truth, the artist best serves his nation, and the nation which disdains the mission of art invites the fate of Robert Frost's hired man, the fate of having nothing to look backward to with pride and nothing to look forward to with hope. I look forward to a great future for America, a future in which our country will match its military strength with our moral restraint, its wealth with our wisdom, its power with our purpose. I look forward to an America which will not be afraid of grace and beauty, which will protect the beauty of our natural environment, which will preserve the great old American houses and squares and parks of our national past, and which will build handsome and balanced cities for our future. I look forward to an America which will stand and reward achievements in the art as we reward achievements in business or statecraft. I look forward to an America which will steadily raise the standards of artistic accomplishment and which will steadily enlarge cultural opportunities for all of our citizens. And I look forward to an America which commands respect through the world for not only its strength, but for its civilization as well. I look forward to a world which will be safe not only for democracy and diversity, but also for personal distinction. Robert Frost was often skeptical about his projects for human improvement, yet I do not think he would often disdain this hope. As he wrote during the uncertain days of the Second War, "Take human nature altogether since time began, and it must be a little in favor of man. Say a fraction of 1% at the very least, our hold on this planet wouldn't have so increased." Because of Mr. Frost's life and work, because of the life and work of this college, our hold on this planet has increased. Thank you.